Right, over to you, Geraldine.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Well, on behalf of the worshipful company of stationers and newspaper makers, I'd like to welcome you all to this online event this evening. My name is Geraldine Allinson, and I've been a member here at the Stationers Company for many years, and I'm also chair of the Education Committee. There are a number of people here who may not have a direct connection with the Stationers Company. So before our speakers start, I'd like to say a few words about who we are and what we do. The Stationers Company is the City of London livery company that helps individuals and organisations in the communications and content industries improve their performance and prospects. Our unique 600-year-old tradition combines conviviality with the enhancement of business and society. From the invention of our copyright to the contributions we make today through education, training, and charitable endeavour. The company is unique among the older London liveries, with its active links to its modern trades. Out of nearly 1,000 members today, a vast majority are actively involved in paper, print, publishing, packaging, office products, newspapers, broadcasting, online media, and design. In this fast and ever-changing world, the Stationers Company continues to be that important link from the past to the future. As most of you will know, our hall is currently closed for development work, so we'll continue to hold online events such as this until the summer, when we look forward to the reopening of our hall. This evening is being recorded, so those who are unable to join tonight can watch it later on. The link to the recording will be sent out to everyone who's registered for the event, as will copies of the slides used during the evening. Now, before I formally introduce you to our panel tonight, I will just lay out the format for this event. The plan is to run for an hour and a quarter, so we aim to finish at 7:15. Our speakers will talk for about the first half an hour, and then we'll move on to a panel discussion. There are some prepared questions, but anyone in the audience who wishes to ask a question can do so by typing in or clicking on the Q&A and typing in the box at the bottom of the screen. So I will monitor those questions and I'll try very hard to incorporate them at the appropriate time. Right, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker tonight, and this is Anne Ashworth, who is the Stationers Company's very own Apprenticeship Ambassador. Anne is a liveryman with us here at Stationers and has been working in the education and learning sector for nearly 40 years. Having run her own successful consultancy for over 20 years, she's now with Pearson PLC, overseeing their apprenticeship programme. And with all the spare time she has, and I say that with a bit of a smile because I know she's a very busy lady, she has been running our Stationers Apprentice Futures initiative. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and welcome everybody. I was given quite a daunting task, I have to say, by our former master, Helen Esmond, to pick up the mantle of Apprentice Futures. And she handed over to me in what was probably the back end of 2019. Little did I know what was going to happen in 2020. In some ways, it was slightly easier because Helen had actually set out a 2-day event at the Guildhall. And obviously for 2020, that was impossible to do. So it gave us, I suppose, a different view as to what the year would look like. But Apprentice Futures has really become a very important part of the Stationers. It really is all about apprenticeships for our industries and how we can provide useful information to young people and those that are keen on joining our industries, but also a bit of a one-stop shop in terms of employers putting up their information they have on their apprenticeship programs, and also signposting to other useful websites and links, such as the London Apprenticeship Ambassador network that Neil chairs, and also BPIF, who is incredibly active in this space, as you would expect. So really, what we have now is Apprentice Futures as a website, which is being revamped at this moment in time, but then also a series of events that happen. So our sort of view for what happened last year then, if Siobhan wouldn't mind moving us forward, is that we took very much an online approach, as you would expect. So we tried to emulate what we did in the previous year, but with an online focus. And I have to say, I think we were pretty successful. During National Apprenticeship Week, which runs in the first week of February every year, we had some interviews hosted by some of the apprentices that are working with members of the Stations Company, interviewing the master, and that was recorded and was utilised on the apprenticeship website. We also have done quite a bit of work with the Stations Crown Woods Academy during last year, and now moving into this year as well. So we've attended some virtual events with them. We've done some sessions, mentoring sessions, speed networking sessions. And that, I suppose, the activity in a virtual setting has actually made us more imaginative in what we do, and that's also made us more agile in our ability to work with the students and the needs of the students in the school as well. I think the thing that we were particularly proud of, and a big thanks I have to say to the Apprentice Futures Working Group, that was an offshoot from the Education Committee. Everybody just really stuck in and made a huge success of our 2 days as part of the London Careers Festival. So we moved what was a physical event at the Guildhall into 2 days of virtual events, and we ran 11 30-minute sessions with various employers. Master also ran a session for us as well. And there you can see some of the wonderful statistics and some of the quotes from the students. And I have to say, when you look at the statistics from London Careers Festival overall, we did really well. And I think that's testament to the content, the interest that the employers bring to students who really are keen to find out anything and everything about apprentices. And when I say students, I mean not necessarily just schools, but also FE colleges, and also undergraduates who are about to graduate. They're keen to move into apprenticeships now because they see them as the starting point for a career. So I have to say, Apprentice Futures last year, absolutely superb. And now, of course, we move into 2022 and we have big plans yet again. So in National Apprenticeship Week, we're doing a session with the Stations Crown Woods Academy, and we're already planning that. So Siobhan and I have been busy beavering away on it. We were going to do a Leeds Career Fair with BPIF, but unfortunately that's been put on hold because of all the arrangements that are going on. But it doesn't mean to say that we're not doing things behind the scenes. We are. So BPIF and ourselves are in talks about what we can do later on in the year. We've got loads of other virtual careers fairs that will be going on as well, and probably at some point in time moving into a physical one. As part of Apprentice Futures, we also relaunched the ceremony for binding and freemen for apprentices. So centuries old ceremony that we're all incredibly proud of. That will be now hosted physically, we hope, in our very own hall towards probably the end of June. That would be wonderful. So that's introducing young people to the stationers, and who will then become part of our young stationers group of members. So we're very pleased about that one, and that's open not just to Pearson apprentices where we started it, but to any other members of the stationers who have apprentices where you feel something like this would be really good for them. We're also looking at the Guildhall again, and the plan is at the moment to consider doing a physical event there on the 4th and the 5th of July. That is the plan. So we're working towards that, and that will be amazing. I mean, we had so many employers there last time, and I've already got people that are signing up to say they would like a stand. So already that's beginning to get some momentum behind it. And of course, we've got the redesign of our Apprentice Futures website as well, which is ongoing at this moment in time. So as you can see, another busy, exciting, stimulating year. and one where we're really keen to get the name of the stationers out there and seen to be a force for information and change for apprenticeships for our industries. So I look forward to working with you all, and if you have any questions, please filter them through. You'll see my email address on the last slide, and of course any questions, please ask them as we go through the event.
Thank you very much, Anne. Now it's for me to introduce Siobhan Bradley, who is going to talk to us about government-funded learning initiatives that are available to businesses. Now, Siobhan is the Employee Apprenticeship Programme Manager at Pearson PLC, and I believe the company has over 100 apprentices. Is that right, Siobhan? After graduating, Siobhan knew she wanted to help others through learning and further education, and she now has over 20 years experience in this sector and has been a specialist in employee training and development, including apprenticeships, since 2011. Siobhan is also a member of the National Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. So over to you, Siobhan.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thanks very much. I will be covering some detail on the government initiatives, and I'll be talking quite a lot about these 4 different schemes with some detail attached to that we will provide in an appendix to the slides that we'll be able to share with all the attendees after the event. So no need to kind of make some detailed notes unless you want to do that. Thank you to the team and the Apprenticeship Futures team for running tonight. I'm very passionate about apprenticeships, but all the other initiatives as well around employer learning. So we would like to take this opportunity just to run through some of the opportunities, initiatives that are available to maximise your workforce planning and development at this time. The pandemic has really put the skills agenda back on the table, and employers are a driving force for the government. So they're really there to be utilised, and Anne and other big employers like Pearson, we work with the Ambassador Network, work tirelessly every day to promote these types of initiatives to create opportunities in London and beyond. So apprenticeships, one very close to my heart, and some of the speakers that you'll hear today will really heavily sort of weigh in on the benefits of apprenticeships. But what is an apprenticeship to someone who might not really know about what they are and how they work? They are a genuine job. So it is a contract employment that you have to be able to give to an employee. That's attached to a specific training development programme. So all of the terms and conditions that you give to your normal employees are in place for an apprentice, the salary, as well as the time off to do the apprenticeship training. And this equates to about 1/5 of the working week, so 20% of the working time of the individual. The training is delivered by a private training provider or a college or even a university in some instances, and you would work with them to develop the needs of your business and training around that particular training area. There's over 600 apprenticeship standards now available. I looked today, it's actually 641. So growing by the day, and anything ranging from level 2 to level 7. For the attendees on this call, I'm sure will be interested to hear that they are in areas such as publishing, events, but they are also in things like accounting, finance, and cyber. IT, you name it, there is an apprenticeship standard. So something there for all, I'm sure. They run for a minimum duration of about 12 months, but as you can imagine, it will depend on the level and the expertise needed for the top particular job and occupational area. So for degrees, they can run up to 4 years in length. Training costs, you'll be happy to hear, are often met 100% of the time. And that can be done with working with the National Society of, the National Apprenticeship Service, where they would link you with a training provider who would have funding available to fund the apprenticeship training, or by linking with a large employer using something called the Transfer of Funds Levy transfer. And Anne will touch on that a little bit later today about how that works. Effectively, I would like to say to people, don't let the training costs, if you hear funding bans and kind of high cost of apprenticeship training, put you off getting involved, because often the cost is waived to employers. And there is huge benefits. I mean, at this time, recruitment in the marketplace across all different occupational areas has been tricky for people. As we move out of the pandemic, we're finding that people are being a bit more picky about what they want and the requirements and areas that they're working in. And some jobs are just finding it really hard to recruit. Could an apprenticeship be something that would help you in that area? You can advertise your roles on a national apprenticeship site. There's a team, usually in a training provider or university setting, that can help you with promote your roles, to draft job descriptions, adverts, so they can actually help with the advert on things like LinkedIn, pushing it out for a lot more wider portals, recruitment agencies than you might currently have access to, or that you can afford to access to, because they can be quite expensive in terms of recruitment costs. Other benefits include productivity, and the National Apprenticeship Service did a study last year with employers, and they said that 75% of all employers engaged in apprenticeships noted that productivity had increased, and 76% said that they had noticeable improvements in the quality of the products and services that they produced. All really good things. I could go on and on about apprenticeships, about the ideas that come in from younger apprentices, the diverse candidate pool that you can bring in through increasing your access for apprenticeships, the increased satisfaction levels that have been proven for your existing staff by having new apprentices join, morale levels if you include things like mentorship programs within your business to help aid apprenticeships, and staff turnover as a result often is lower, because apprentices are known to be quite loyal and stay in businesses where they've been sort of grown from the start. All this is great things. Other things to include are things like national insurance contributions are waived if you take on an apprentice under 25. So your costs can be dramatically reduced if you look at apprenticeships as an offering to bring young people into your business. We talk a lot about apprenticeships and young people, and we are passionate within Apprentice Futures that we do promote apprenticeships to employers, and we work a lot with schools. But it is worth noting that apprenticeships are not just for young people. They are for anyone over the age of 16 with no upper age limit. They are also not just for entry-level positions. They're for all levels and are now available up to level 7. Anne and I worked tirelessly actually across the industry to talk about this, and most of my recent recruitment opportunities have been at level 4 and 5 in things like project management and chartered management apprenticeships. So just one to kind of myth bust that it's not just for the low skilled, that if you're looking for skilled labour or for people who've got experience and have transferable skills, apprenticeships could be a really good option. I'll move on to traineeships. And they really are a different programme in that a trainee is somebody who is 16 to 24 years old, who will not be an employee, but will work on a placement within your company for up to 70 hours. So a lot shorter in duration, less commitment, and this might be something if you're new to the world of sort of working with young people and accessing government initiatives, this might be the one for you. It's still linked to a skills development plan, so there is training in place, and you would work with a training provider to develop the programme, but very much kind of light touch in the sense in terms of the time and the commitment that you would initially have to put into the placement. They can last from anything from 6 weeks up to 1 year, which seems long, but like I said, it is only for at least 70 hours. It can be up to 240 hours. Majority of employers that Anne and I work with usually run traineeships over a period of about 6 months. Benefits, again, really under your control. You can design the program with your training provider to get the actual program that's right for you and also that trainee. You're also giving somebody the opportunity to get some real work experience under their belt. So for some, this is a really nice one to start in terms of corporate social responsibility, giving someone the opportunity to get some experience on their CV to apply possibly for a job within your organisation, but elsewhere as well. There is no actual costs involved other than the time that it would take for you to support the young person. There's no salary contribution that's required. And there currently is a £1,000 incentive payment as well for traineeships. It's a really good way to kind of get to know someone, try them out in your organisation for fit, and to see if whether or not you could offer an apprenticeship at a later date. There is one caveat to this. You do need to offer some meaningful feedback at the end, and there may be some paperwork associated with this because it is government funded. So it's just one thing to bear in mind. I'll move on to something called industry placements as part of TLevels. TLevels were launched back in September 2020 at the height of the pandemic. Was really a challenging time for schools and sixth forms and FE colleges to launch the TLevels, but they've done a fantastic job, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to place 6 TLevel placements within Pearson, and also to have conversations across our network around how TLevels are working up and down the country. And so far the news and kind of success has been really, really positive. What I really like about these, and what I think will speak to a lot of you on the call, is that they're developed in collaboration with employers and businesses. So they've been really revamped in the last couple of years to look at the content that's being taught in that sort of 16 to 18 age bracket to meet the needs of industry now and in the future. They are designed also to equip the young person with the tools that they need for further study if they want to go to university, and they are recognised as part of UCAS points, but very much linked also to further training and study if young people would like to move into apprenticeships. And we're lobbying the government hard, actually, that these level 3 TLevel qualifications translate well into progression opportunities into level 3 and level 4 apprenticeships for young people. There are a number of TLevels available in the digital area at the moment, as well as some in construction and in education. I think on this call, probably the digital ones are probably most notable for what the areas are in terms of publishing and maybe marketing. And that's what we've gone for initially within our business. But there are, in September 2022, a number of more relevant ones that might work for businesses, such as finance, management, administration. So more and more are coming on board in a pathway plan for the next sort of 10 years. So one to watch, I would say, in terms of specific specialisms and areas that you might want to get involved in. A TLevel placement is 45 days in duration, and usually that is carried out in the second year of a TLevel and can span many weeks, up until probably 1 year, depending if you did 1 day a week or 2 days a week. We tend to find that the colleges and schools are quite flexible in permitting 1 or 2 days a week, or possibly longer periods during school holidays. So that's another one that's quite flexible to work with your business. There's no cost to having a TLevel placement student in your business. There's actually a £1,000 incentive payment for the employer to take on the young person, although we find it's quite good practice to give contributions towards things like travel and lunch if the TLevel student is coming on site. Another benefit of this one is similar to some of the other initiatives that we'll talk about tonight, is really getting to know a young person before they possibly could join your organisation into a permanent position or into an apprenticeship. And this is what my managers have really fed back to me, that they're enjoying about the programme, getting to know someone, and they really want to keep them at the end, which is music to mine and Anne's ears. So that's just something to be mindful about, is that often the progression route for TLevel students will be that they would like to stay in employment or go on to an apprenticeship. So it's to look further afield about what you can offer someone after they've completed the 45 days with you. If you can only offer 45 days, it's a great way to still support TLevels as an academic pathway for young people. And we are struggling to get placements. So Anne's a TLevel Ambassador. So it's something we really promote. If you can offer a TLevel placement, there doesn't have to be a job at the end of it. It is something to consider. It's cost-effective recruitment in that way as well, in that you will already have your recruitment done if there's someone that you can progress into a role. I'll now move on to digital skills boot camps, which are a different initiative again to what I've outlined today. These are relatively new. Funding for these has only become available in the autumn of 2021. In a direct response again to reskilling the recovery, the government has pledged £8 million regionally to upskilling and offering new skills to unemployed staff in the area of digital and IT. We've been quite impressed, Anne and myself, when we've met a number of the regional providers for these, and they do vary depending on where you are based, and some of the eligibility varies as well. But the areas around digital marketing, data analyst, leadership tools for the digital age, cyber, there's also software engineering, TLevel boot camps. So lots of different ranges of digital skills, equivalent to about level 3. And the value of the funding is pitched at about £3,000 per employee. So substantial funding for staff who are working, but also if you're willing to support people who might be close to the workplace, it's good to have an awareness of what these TLevels mean, as you may start seeing them on people's CVs coming through your recruitment channels as well. On the matrix that we will send with further information after the event, there's a detailed website with all of the regional funding that's available and in what areas and what the eligibility criteria are. So we will provide that afterwards, and I would recommend that you look at that. The commitment really for you as an employer, if you support your staff to go on these, is the time out. and they can range from anything from 15 to 30 weeks of a day a week. So there is a commitment in terms of time. But what we've found so far when we've pitched this to some of our employees is that data analyst skills, Excel skills are really in demand at the moment. And we know from some of the information that we're getting through from some of the local LEPs that data roles are really highly sought. So if we can upskill our own employees to have those data skills for the future, it's a win for the business, but also for the employee who feels that they're being developed and sort of the morale goes up, that they feel that they're getting training in an area that maybe if we had to pay for that outside wouldn't have happened. So just one to flag. And that's it overall in terms of the 4 initiatives that we wanted to cover today. I just wanted to say that a number of these initiatives do have incentives. The apprenticeship incentive of £3,000, which is a huge boost for some small employers to take on a new hire, does end at the 31st of January. So we are close to that in terms of new recruits. Hopefully it will be extended. It has been a number of times in the past, so we're hoping again that we might get the policy word that that will be extended. And some of the others as well have incentives that run to different times through the year. It's just one to kind of be mindful of and to discuss that with your training provider if the incentive is a real of importance to you in your decision whether or not to pursue this. And these initiatives are changing all the time. New ones are being introduced all the time. So Apprentice Futures and that work that we do within the working group are really keen to get our website revamped and to have an area where we'll have news events where we'll be sharing further information about initiatives that are available for you and to maximise business and talent, especially in the areas of apprenticeships. Over to you, Anne.
Siobhan,
Thanks very much, Siobhan.
Yep, fine. Over to you, Anne. Sorry.
Sorry, Geraldine. Siobhan mentioned transfer of funds, and I just thought I would just raise that with you because I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to support each other within the stationers. So any employer who has a wage bill of over £3 million actually becomes a levy paying employer. And I won't go into the detail of that, but basically that money is ring-fenced to be spent on apprenticeship training. We're allowed to actually spend up to 25% of whatever our fund is to support other employers with the training costs of their apprentices. So in Pearson's case, we're supporting 15 companies and 40 plus apprentices. So it's a great way to actually spread out your tendrils of support for smaller businesses, those that perhaps in sectors that you feel need that help. And certainly I think in our case, actually supporting other members that are in the industry is great. I think we've got 2 stationers companies that we're actually supporting at the moment. So it's a great way to do it. And I mean, a little bit later on, I'll explain more, but to actually use a levy paying employer does give you a little bit of a backstop as a small business, particularly if you've never got engaged in government funding before. It can be a little bit daunting. And it just means that you've got somebody there that you can turn to that will guide you through the process. So we're more than happy to share. And there's a great organisation in London called the London Progressive Collaboration that really are great at linking smaller organisations up with big ones like us and ensuring that you get the right support. So in terms of terminology and process, that can be a little bit daunting, and we, big employers like us can help you through that. The other thing that we found is because we are sharing with a number of employers, we've created a network of employers that are supporting each other. And it's great when you get onto a call, you hear that they've sort of found something out, they share it with each other, and then they're starting to work in partnership with things, which is beginning to move off into their own businesses as well. So another way of sort of extending out the supply chain and the community of support. And from our perspective, it enables us to work with organisations that might be in our supply chain. And again, it strengthens the relationship, which means that we become more productive and more efficient. So I know we're going to have a question a little bit more about this, so I'll leave that then. But if you have any questions on this particularly, then please ask away.
That's great, Anne. Thank you very much. Now, we are moving on to the question part of this evening. And so please, if anyone has got any questions, it doesn't matter how small or large the question is, please do type it in the Q&A box, and we will feed these in through this next part of the evening. But before we continue, I'm now going to introduce our last panel member, who's been sitting very patiently. It's Neil Weller, who became the chair of the London Apprenticeship Network in 2017. Having started his career as an apprentice himself, he's been instrumental in setting up and developing trailblazing apprenticeship schemes. As managing partner of TB&A, he expanded the practice nationally and also formalised their apprenticeship scheme, which has not only won numerous awards, but also their apprentices have been recognised individually for their outstanding achievements. So, Neil, the first question is there on the screen, and we would love to hear your views on this topic.
Thanks very much. And it's a real pleasure to join your event and support the great work you're doing at the stationers. And we really appreciate the efforts that you're going to and the work that Anne and Siobhan have been putting in. So we're really pleased to be here tonight. I think the big thing is, I think that we've heard so many times that employers are the central to this whole thing, the initiatives of training that the Department of Education has tried to put with the Institute of Apprentices, employers front and centre of their needs. It hasn't always seemed that way, possibly, when you've wrestled with all the different rules and different things that are there. But I think it's quite a complex landscape, really. There's so many different learners coming through with different education needs, different cultural, different social backgrounds. And not only that, we've got the sectors and employers are so different in terms of their needs. So it's not a surprise to me that all those different schemes that Siobhan has been through this evening actually will appear quite confusing to many people. On the back of that, we've also got a whole thing of retraining the London or the workforce in London and across the UK as the digital age picks up pace. So I think that probably explains why there's just so many different things. And you can look at even two trailblazers at a similar level and see that the KSBs, which is the knowledge, skills and behaviours, and the endpoint assessments are very, very different. So I think don't be put off and don't be confused by things. Reach out and ask for help. I think that the stationers are doing a great job in terms of sharing information and giving you a touch point to actually help guide you through it. And also the AAN, the Ambassador Network. I think we're more than happy to get involved with all of the different sectors that you represent to support you again into being part of a community that is there committing the workforce of tomorrow. My feeling is we're in a period of continuous improvement rather than radical change. I think having been through COVID and all the efforts that were made in supporting business and taking us forward, I believe that what we're now trying to do is gradual improvement and making things better. We're working with employers to achieve that. I think one of the other big initiatives that the government's got, and I know is central to our London business plan as the AAN, is really supporting SMEs. We see that SMEs are really the roots. They create so many jobs and so many apprenticeships, and probably quicker than bigger organisations. They offer apprenticeships as new vacancies rather than just maybe retraining or reskilling. And I think the other thing that's clear that the SMEs seem to focus on disadvantaged background people and also people under 24. So there's so many great reasons why SMEs are seen as the key to actually progressing apprenticeships, and why we're very important, very focused on getting more SMEs into the AAN and in the whole apprenticeship agenda. I think the country's needs the skills needs are only going to intensify. It's getting harder and harder to find people. And I think the big thing is people can't do it for us. Business needs to find its own way forward. And I think if you're going to get involved in planning your future and planning the skills you need for your own business, it will ensure that you've got the people that was going to drive your own growth and success. So that's probably my answer, Geraldine, to that first point.
Thank you very much, Neil. Actually, I mean, I think everything that you've all spoken about, I think one of the things for SMEs is if they haven't taken that step to doing any of this, when you look at it all, it really can be quite daunting as to where to start. So we have got a question here that is, if an organisation hasn't implemented an apprenticeship programme before, what would your advice be on how to facilitate and how labour intensive is it to manage once it's up and running?
Let me try and answer that. It's a very, very great question, and I think it's one that actually many SMEs have got. But I think I work for an SME. That's my background. That's where we come from. And what we did it really small. We did it just with 1 or 2 people. And the big thing, I think, is getting the mentoring and the support, getting the links to the training providers, and getting those links together so that you sort of learn on the journey. So don't feel that you need to have all the answers at the start. What I found when we brought our apprenticeship program is we found our way forward and we come up with our own solutions to the problems as we went. And the great thing was our first apprentices actually trailblazed the way. Trailblazers is a great word, but they actually come up and solved all the problems with us. It weren't something that they expected to be spoon-fed. And then what we found was in year 2, our first year apprentices took on the mantle of actually training the second year apprentices. So it actually becomes easier and easier as you go through the process with progressively taking people on. The big difficulty is making that first step. People say as small SMEs, we're not quite sure where our workload is going to be in 2 or 3 months' time, or even weeks' time. But the reality is, as any SME, if you stop and think about it, actually you may not see the future or the work horizons as far, but actually they're always there and the work does come in. So don't worry about what the apprentice is going to do, because I think you find that they take over the tasks that increase your productivity and your efficiency, because they're doing the things that in other people concentrating on the higher tasks. So I think it's always daunting, but take the step and I think you'll find your own way. And if you join something like the AAN, you get the support of all the great people like Anne, like Siobhan, and there's hundreds of others that will give their time to support SMEs or large businesses as well. So take that step, don't be frightened.
Sorry, what was that? Did you say AN? What is that?
The AAN is the Apprentice Ambassador Network. So again, Anne will give you links later that if you wanted to get in touch, or you wanted to join, or you wanted to look at the portal and to see all the great ambassadors and the work we're doing, then feel free to get in touch and we'll gladly reach out and help.
So that's the National Apprenticeship Ambassador Network.
Yeah.
And is the London Apprenticeship Network, does that do a similar thing as well? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Geraldine.
Sorry about that. Moving on to the next question, which is slightly linked on the next slide, which is slightly linked to what we've just been talking about, but not completely, which is how would an employer make sense of the different programs to provide a cohesive approach? And Neil, could you start this?
Yeah, sure. I think what it is, I think you need to start with a bit of a vision in terms of what your business needs. It's difficult, and I think it's having a skills plan or a skills policy. It's hard, I know, to actually develop that in the first instance, but without that vision of where you want to go, I think it's difficult to work out which schemes, which incentives, which options are going to suit you. So in the past, I think maybe you could just go out and recruit people and get somebody with that would be close to the finished article. The reality is, I think that's getting harder and harder to do. So maybe now you need to just think about recruiting the right people with sort of attributes you need, and then train them in the role. And that's where I think an apprenticeship is such a great way to develop young people. You put them alongside people that have actually been in the industry or doing a job for 20, 30 years, or even if it's only a year with an apprentice looking after them. And they get the skills transfer and actually from one generation to the next. So I think you can look at all the schemes on offer, but I think the most important thing to me is think about progression. If you take a young person on, you should be thinking and planning their future with them and looking at how they might translate from one offer to next, or one apprenticeship to the next. And I think that's really important. I think if people see a pathway to their future, they feel valued and motivated. So I think, yes, there's a lot of things you need to consider, and whether it's retraining existing or developing new, I think all of these things are options. And I think from what Siobhan was telling you earlier, I think they're all options that you can pick and mix to see, and working out which best suit will depend on your sector, your job, and your role. So,
I mean,
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, Anne, over to you.
I'm always butting in, I apologise. I mean, I think following on from what you've said, Neil, when you're thinking about your workforce strategy, your succession planning, knowing that you've got these different programs that you can tap into is going to help with the thinking. You know, you'll be thinking about your recruitment, you'll be thinking about your upskilling of your existing staff. Think about your priorities. Where are your skills gap? Where's your mandatory training needs? Where's your nice to have? And when you put all that together, and probably it's a matrix approach, you'll then begin to see which of these programs will work for you. I think, as Neil said, progression is really, really important. And Siobhan mentioned it was a great way to sort of test a young person out when you're doing something like a TLevel industrial placement or doing a traineeship, because the natural progression is to move them into an apprenticeship. And you've had significant time with them, so you know where their strengths are, you know when they can fit. And also you're in the same time, you're training up the managers too, to become better managers. I think putting them with a young person, they get so much out of that, and it's hugely beneficial to them and to the business. So, I mean, all in all, it's about that planning and that thought. You don't necessarily need to think too far in the distance. As Neil said, you know, the business turns over. I think one thing you do need to think about, though, is new skills. You know, where are your job roles changing? How fast are they changing? You need to put that into your thought process. And sometimes, you know, like that skills boot camp, that gives you the opportunity to do that short, sharp upskilling of staff, so they're equipped for the new jobs that you know that you're going to have coming into the business. So I think we've got there a smorgasbord of different opportunities, which I'm sure will evolve over the year as the government brings in different ones. But as long as you have got a plan that meets your business needs and you dip into these as and when appropriate, then I think you've got yourself a really good offer that should work for all of your needs, really. Very few gaps, I think, would exist still.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of things that I just want to add in here from people who are making contributing to this. First of all, someone starts asking very quickly, is the traineeship basically the same as the Kickstart program? It's not.
No. The traineeship program are young people that are either in learning with a training provider or a college, and they've generally come out of school and gone into that next stage of education, equivalent to level 2. So it's a sort of a precursor to apprenticeship, whereas the Kickstart is unemployed young people that are on the cusp of being fairly long-term unemployed. Those young people could actually already have degrees, for example, and have done an apprenticeship before or other training. So a very different type of candidate there.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, also Doug Wills is wanted to make a comment, and he wanted to really endorse what Neil has said about once you've taken the first step, it all falls into place. And I think it probably is, for a lot of people, when they haven't done any of this, it is the first step that it probably is the most difficult. But actually now Doug at the Evening Standard has taken on apprentices into busy and manic editorial department, and now with the support of stationers, he's in his 8th year of editorial apprenticeships and just taking on the next lot of recruits. So if that isn't an endorsement of taking the first step, I don't know what is. But maybe if we move on to the next slide, that's also linked to what we've just been discussing in terms of the first step. Siobhan, do you have any examples of how these initiatives, particularly using transfer of funds, have worked for small businesses?
Yes, thanks, Geraldine. I have, and I've been fortunate enough to work in a position where, as a large employer who has reserves of levy funding, I am able to support small employers through that landscape and to navigate all the different schemes, but also the apprenticeship world, and see it really come to fruition for them and see the benefits. So I would say we've touched a lot on recruitment tonight, and we've talked about the cost of recruitment and the difficulty recruiting. But one of the really nice things I've seen and the benefits that we've sort of promoted through the transfer of funds with our small employers is the diverse range of candidates that an employer is able to promote and bring into businesses through the apprenticeship route. And in sectors that historically might have found it difficult to attract that type of candidate. And I can recall one small employer that I worked with a number of years ago that was a family-run business. And that was one of their key motivations for taking on an apprentice, was that, you know, it was run by family, everyone knew each other, they wanted to bring in someone new, someone younger, fresh ideas, and that person has sort of now moved up the ladder and is an operations manager for the company. So a real success story. In terms of other sort of successes that I've been involved in is where possible, small employers have looked at it to upskill existing members of staff. So they've used it internally first before they've gone out and done the full recruitment drive to take in new apprentices. They've supported maybe managers to get the skills first. So they're equipping them with the coaching skills and the managerial skills they need to actually then be able to manage an apprentice. So that's also, and you know, that's really been a win-win for some small employers. I can think of one that is in a healthcare setting where they supported someone to do the chartered management degree apprenticeship. And what a fantastic way to get supported by your employer to get a degree, but also then they were able to take on a receptionist in a healthcare setting and take on that apprentice who's fully supported by someone who was going through a level 6 degree. So again, we've had lots of success stories. One, and I think you'll recall, we had someone who was in a real rural setting in Oxfordshire, and they found it really difficult to recruit, and they converted this vacancy in digital tech into an apprenticeship. And not only were they inundated with applications, but again, inundated with a different type of application, and it brought something else to their business. So they weren't always sort of recruiting the same type of person, which I think, given the DE&I agenda for lots of us at the moment, it's not always the driving force, but we are trying to make sure that we're as accessible to candidates and promoting ourselves as diverse employers. Small employers are usually more acutely aware of their skills gaps, and maybe areas where they know that they could almost target or have a niche for, but they just don't have the resource to pursue an opportunity. So once they know that and they know where their skills gaps are, sometimes, and Neil mentioned this, they can move a lot quicker than large employers. So seeing what's out there, using these different initiatives with what's right for your business at this time is maybe there's a project or a new tender that you're going for that you haven't got the resource internally, and you have to say that you'll be able to recruit that person quite quickly, then the apprenticeship route often can be a really good way to get that resource in and train them on the job, and also expose an area that you might have been for a long time sort of sitting back on. So that's another one I've seen work really well. In terms of the benefits, really, time and time again, we hear this is about the loyalty, training your own and having that long-term progression route for someone. Neil's mentioned it. You know, you don't, in some aspects, have to have the full plan. You know, it's a work in progress when you bring someone on board to see how they fit and what they want to do within their own development. But that long-term progression and having next steps planned out really is a successful benefit that I've seen with small employers. And then we talked a little bit.
Sorry, Siobhan, I'd probably just echo that an example of what we were saying was, I think when we started our programme, ours started with 16-year-olds doing a level 3. And actually, while they were progressing through the level 3 apprenticeship, we were writing the level 4 and the level 6 as progression routes. So the time pressure for us was we had a couple of years to get them in place so that when our apprentices finished, they had the relevant trailblazers to go on. But I think it's just reinforcing that point that not always the things there, but once you've started, you can then future plan it and proof it as you go.
Yeah. And just in terms of kind of the concerns, and I know sometimes we can be so positive about apprenticeships, and we're such advocates on this call that, you know, people are often like, well, what is the kind of the hours it takes or the pitfalls? And generally, like, it is pretty good. And if you get a really good relationship with a training provider, they can really be a source of support for you from recruitment right through the whole training program and beyond in terms of progression as well. So that would be one of the lessons that I've said, that when it goes really well, it's usually because you've formed a really good relationship with a training provider, you know, that are flexible. You know, we work with people who are in sectors such as construction or retail. You know, small employers that are in them sectors have to be, and during the pandemic, you know, if you've had to really adapt, and training providers that can be supportive in that way is really important. And I would say the other lessons that I've learned is managers, the importance of having good managers who know, you know, and buy into the apprenticeship or whatever scheme or initiative you bring in, having the managers on board, that they get the training and support that they need to be able to, especially if it's young people, have the support to be able to support that young person if you bring them in.
Thank you very much. Yeah, support for the manager, because I mean, I suppose some managers, if they've never had an apprenticeship or an apprentice working with them before, might be quite daunted about actually you know, supporting that apprentice. So does the training provider help provide that support to the manager in charge of the apprentice as well?
Yes, they can do. So often the training provider will have sort of inductions for line managers, lots of kind of helpful guides. In larger organisation, we actually have an induction and a full programme of support for managers. And again, if you came through something like the transfer of funds route, where you have that networking facility with a large employer and join something like the Ambassador network, often you get that sort of resources and help cascaded through those networks.
That's really useful. And then if I can move on to you, Anne, with the next part of this question about the bureaucracy of it. Could you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's probably less bureaucracy than people might think, actually. With the transfer of funds, you've got that big levy paying employer there to help. I think, you know, in terms of a small business, you just need somebody who's a champion, somebody who's prepared to support, whether it be upskilling existing member of staff or bringing in a new. There is a little bit of administration that's needed, but as you've said previously, when you've got a really good training provider on board, and of course they need procuring, so do all your checks, you know, but when you get a really good one, and there are some really good ones out there, and you know, from a reputational point of view, you hear about them, they can help out enormously by doing a lot of the legwork for you. The systems that the government have set up through National Apprenticeship Service are also pretty straightforward and simple. You know, the money, when it exchange hands, is pretty straightforward. It doesn't touch your financial systems at all, actually, which makes it a real boon for small businesses, because you don't have to worry about all of that paperwork. And again, you know, it's just keeping an eye on the apprentices that you have, as you would do any other employee. You know, how are they performing? Are you getting a return on investment? Is their performance improving? It's very straightforward. And so from a bureaucratic point of view, probably not as much as you might think. I mean, we always talk about loads of paperwork. Obviously, a lot of that is now digital. So the paperwork aspect has definitely decreased. And the time it takes to enroll an apprentice on programme is significantly less than it ever used to be. So I wouldn't let any of that put you off at all. It's about the business benefit to you. All the other stuff is easily managed.
That's good to hear. What sort of, how much, I mean, can you give an example of how many, if you have one apprentice, does it mean the paperwork's quite a lot, but if you have three, actually it's not 3 times the amount of one? What can you
I think the paperwork is probably 3 times because you need to complete it for each. But in terms of time, you know, if you're working with 3 with one training provider, then you get a performance report for 3. You monitor 3 through the same system. You're putting the money through the same way as you would. So you do get a streamlined efficiency the more apprentices you've got. However, if you start then offering lots of different apprenticeship programs, then you start working with different training providers because you would want specialisms and stuff like that. So it's about, you know, cutting your cloth to the need that you've got and making sure that you don't make it overly burdensome for yourself. I mean, big companies like ours at Pearson, you know, we've got an apprenticeship team. And we put a lot of time and effort into what we do internally, but also externally and with the transfer of funds. You do not need to do it that way at all as a small business. And you do what you feel is comfortable for you to do, and then put more burden on your training provider because they will step up. I mean, they're very good at helping with recruitment, for example. All of the initial assessment induction, you've heard line manager support, but they might help with surveys. If you want to push those out to your staff to find out how things are going on. If you want to do case studies and social media, they'll help you with that as well. So there's all sorts of value added that your training provider brings into the relationship with you.
Thank you. Siobhan, can I very quickly go back to you, because when you were talking, you mentioned that you thought apprenticeships help with diversity, and there is a specific question here saying, could these apprenticeship degrees in media and publishing be a route to broaden diversity in the workforce? Why do you think it is that apprenticeships why do you think it is you think apprenticeships help with diversity? What is it about them that means that potentially more diverse people will want to do them?
Well, we've touched a lot tonight on recruitment. So by working with a training provider and through the National Apprenticeship Service national portal, you are advertising your vacancy to a much wider pool. Often brand awareness for some SMEs and even some of the networks and events I've been through with stationers, they don't always have their own websites. They don't have someone in L&D or even a recruiter who promotes their activity around this. So they're not doing school engagement. Whereas if you work with a training provider through the apprenticeship route, you will fall naturally into their processes for promoting vacancies, school work, liaison work, some of the work we do, Apprentice Futures, pushing that out wider to schools in areas that maybe historically might have only looked at degrees, for example, and moving people through into university routes. There has been a shift in mindset as well around apprenticeship. So we are seeing a bigger pool of candidates more generally applying instead of just the university route. I think it's twofold. It's the recruitment, but it's also the fact that training providers also are incentivized. So there's a lot of activity around this, around pushing recruitment and working with candidates who might be socially deprived. So they'll work and engage in a different way to how possibly employers might. So they'll have outreach teams, they'll have support counsellors, they'll have a lot of kind of networking to help with this and promote roles to groups that naturally might not have even thought that employment would have been an option for them.
Thank you. I'm really sorry, my screen has just completely gone mad. If you can hear me, could you please go on to the next question, and maybe Neil, you could just look at that. We do have another question about T-levels in a minute, but if I disappear and come back, just please forgive me.
Neil, can you see the question? You're on mute.
Thanks. That's the great team saying, isn't it? The last couple of years, you're on mute. So I think what we were going to talk about, what do apprentices? I think you've touched on it earlier, Siobhan, in terms of all of the benefits. Let me just tell you from my own perspective, as the managing partner of a business, a small SME, 40% of my business or my employees are apprentices, 40%. So think about that. We've taken a long while to get there, but as a small business, I couldn't afford, unless it made complete economic sense, and these apprentices were actually playing a real valued role within the business, we couldn't afford to sustain that. So what I would say is this, that the reality is that apprenticeships do work. I could do I could do a presentation on all the benefits, but the reality is, I think, believe me, as an SME, they make complete sense. So don't think about it, just go out and try and do it. There's so many different roles. We're lucky as a business that most of mine are engineers, and they can join at 16, and they can go all the way through to being degree qualified, and they could be chartered in terms of their profession. So we offer a future for our young people, but they pay us back in so many different ways. You know, the fresh perspective of how to do things, that youthful culture within the business that's shaken us up. We've got a female intake of 40%, which we've never, ever been able to achieve in the construction sector. So the benefits and the hidden benefits are there. And I think once you make those first steps, all of a sudden, all of these things open up. Siobhan, you mentioned the diversity and the different people that are attracted to my business now. And it's really refreshing, and actually it's changing my business. But the most important thing, we've got an apprenticeship program which is guaranteeing our future as a small business. We've never had the name or the reputation to be able to put an advert out like Pearson's or like Amazon and actually have hundreds of people. The BBC have hundreds of apprenticeships. Actually, all of a sudden, with a good apprenticeship linked into the schools and college networks, we're getting the whole of our recruitment. We're getting fantastic people applying. And not only that, we've got a pipeline of talent that's going to take my business into the future for the next 20 years, 25 years. So I think that the benefits, and there's stats and there's everything that you can read. Forget that, just go and do it. Believe me, it makes complete business sense. And the quality of the young people will just amaze you. And they surprise me every day in terms of how good they are and how they've taken our business forward. So
I don't know if I can add that, Neil. You're so passionate around it. I love it. Yeah, no, just do it. And I think daily I'm just always in awe of the apprentices, and it's so good for your other staff members to have younger people and their views part of networks. We've got a lot of employee reference groups in Pearson, and having that young voice come through just basically really galvanizes the whole business.
I mean,
So
we've got an employer network of ambassadors, and what a great, I cannot speak highly enough of my ambassador group in London. You know, they work so well, they do so much for young people. But the really great thing is we've got a young ambassador network, and they absolutely amaze me as well. So not only have we got the employers, we've got the apprentices, and they're going out into schools, getting the message out. And I think we are turning that corner in terms of the value of apprenticeships. It's got so much good. They reckon, UCAS were telling me the other day, it's probably about a 50-50 split now in terms the people that are searching apprentices as well as universities. It's probably half and half. And I think when you look at all of the advantages you give people from such diverse backgrounds, that they're able to access university and education that maybe their families just couldn't afford. And I think they open up that talent, that young talent pipeline, and they're not only are they grateful, they work extremely hard. And it's much harder than university because they're keeping their job down and they're doing their university and they're doing everything else. So actually, as young people, their time management, their ability to get through their work is fantastic. And actually, at the end of it, I think they're very rounded and very grounded. Rounded and grounded, it all rhymes tonight. So yeah, I think all of the people on the call, we are absolutely so passionate about young people and apprenticeships.
That's really great to hear, and it's lovely to hear it's 50-50, because I know for a long time we've been wanting that to grow. So you guys have obviously done a fantastic job with the ambassadorship of apprentices. Now, very quickly, I just want to move very quickly. I'll come back to you, Anne, in a minute on next steps via Apprentice Futures. But very quickly, there is a question that has been sitting here, and it's actually a question about whether there's enough encouragement. This is about TLevels, whether, considering what schools have gone through in the last 2 years with COVID and everything, do you think there is actually enough encouragement for schools to take up TLevels? Please don't spend a very long time on this, but what's your opinion? If I can go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the government has put an awful lot of effort into TLevels, and the pandemic certainly has slowed things down. The development is still on track. So as Siobhan was saying, we've got new ones coming on board this year and next year. The issue is the industrial placements and making sure that those are set up alongside the delivery. And so it's working with businesses all around the country to make sure that those are in place. I think, you know, having the parity between TLevels, A-levels, apprenticeships, so that there's a clarity with that too, for parents and students to make the decisions. They need to know exactly what a T-level is going to give them and what progression routeways are open to them, to make sure that they know what they're getting into. That for me is still probably very much missing. I think schools and colleges are still slightly uncertain about how much time and effort is needed to put into developing the curriculum. And I know there's a lot of central government support for putting specialist equipment in, setting up T-level academies and things like that, but that still needs to evolve. From an employer perspective, I think the industrial placement, as you've heard, is going to work really well. If you get it right and you get the structures right and you get a good relationship, it's something that you can have available for your local schools on a rolling program every year. So there's huge benefits for both the school and the employer. And the more that happens, the more case studies will go into the schools that they can then share with parents and students to encourage them to take it up. So it's still very much developing, early days.
Thank you. Siobhan or Neil, have you got anything you'd like to add to that about T-levels? No. All right. And this is really, I suppose, the last part of this session. Can you expand on what someone would like to do with next steps through maybe Apprentice Futures?
Absolutely. Well, obviously, you come and visit the Apprentice Futures website. You know, that's just what you do. In the slide deck that goes with this, as Siobhan's got up there, you've got a few really good websites that we've pulled out for you, where you will get clear and concise information on any of the programs we've talked about tonight, actually. I mean, some of them are London specific, because again, we were thinking about, you know, those organisations that might be here tonight that are based in London. But you will find these exist all over the country as well. So where they are regional, there will be regional versions of. And if you reach out, we can always put you in touch with the region that you need. But the key thing is just getting a really good understanding of what you are looking for. And then I would always start off with the government website, actually. That gives you good information on everything. Look at it from a high level though. Don't start digging down too deeply, because it then goes into the mechanics, which will bog you down no end, as I tried to do the other day. So just don't do that. But once you've got a fairly good understanding, then reach out to ourselves at Apprentice Futures, reach out to Neil at the London Apprenticeship Ambassador Network, and then we can talk you through the mechanics of actually getting going, but in a way that makes sense to you. There's some really good YouTube clips actually on how to run the digital account system that comes with this, and that's just the way that you process the money. So but again, very straightforward. So reach out and ask questions is probably my main thing, and come to the Apprentice Futures website, and you've got my email address there, and I'll help you out as well.
That's great. And this is not just to do with apprenticeships. If someone's interested in learning more about T-levels or boot camps or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, all of that. As Siobhan said, I'm a T-level ambassador as well. So I do a lot of work around the country on promoting T-levels, the design of. I did some work with the Department for Education earlier this week on some of the design around information for employers particularly, and parents. So yeah, anything at all that you think is of you know, use to find out. I'm sure we'll know where to go for the information if we don't know it already.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Right, I think that's going to bring us to the end of the evening. I would really like to thank all of you three. I mean, the amount of information that you've gone through tonight, and also how passionate you are about apprenticeships and how much you have done for the apprenticeship movement. We're so lucky here at Stationers to have had you as panelists, and also for the relationships we do have with you, either as liverymen or helping with Apprentice Futures and just the links. So thank you very, very much for everything you've done tonight and everything you're continuing to do. I'm sure people will get in touch with you. It's been a fantastic evening. I'd like to thank the audience for attending. I know that some of the things that have been talked about, you know, if you haven't listened to or know much, if you don't know much about it, there has, you know, a lot has been covered in an hour. So so please do go away and think about it, and hopefully we've encouraged some people to look at it more and even maybe take on some apprentices, particularly in the content and communication industries. As I said earlier, we'll follow up this event with a link to the recording and the slides. I think particularly what Siobhan went through, there is a more detailed slide on that. There's much more detail that you can actually look at, which might take it to pieces a bit, having listened to what everyone said. All of us at the Stationers Company, I hope you will join our future events. The next one is on the 22nd of February, looking at the roles of agents, author and editor through a real book project, Publishing in M. And then we have our annual innovations seminar on March the 14th as part of the preparations for the Stationers Innovation in Excellence Awards. All are welcome to our events and they're free, although donations to support our hall charity are always welcome. If tonight's events have inspired you, or you'd like to find out more about us, or you are interested in joining the Stationers Company, please do visit our website, stationers.org, and also visit Apprentice Futures as well. Although that website is going to be going through a bit of a revamp over the next few weeks. So if you don't find what you're looking for on it tomorrow or the next day, don't give up, come back to it or contact one of us through email and hopefully we'll be able to help. So thank you all very much for a very interesting evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again sometime soon. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.